think we are indeed online. Now we test the sound. Online. And it works wonderfully. Oh, and YouTube has notifying me that I am streaming. How lovely of you, YouTube. How lovely. Alright, as usual, we're going to share this everywhere we can. Everywhere we can. Because this is a very important stream. Ladies and gents, very important stream. So, per usual, we start with our own lovely server that I encourage everyone to come and join. Then we go to the Kremlin Games server, where people would be very much interested in this topic, so we paste it. Then we go to the Lumpen Maoist Discord server, the YouTube self-promotion. And another stop would be a lovely little server I'm in, where some people would enjoy it. I could also go to more servers, but I think that's it for now. Yeah. Hello there, Nestor Magno. Hello there. Thank you very much for sending the link. That would be a great boost. That would be a great boost. So, we wait for a little bit until more people join. Then we can start the stream. Of course. We've got all night, maybe throughout the night. The stream might cut up, might stop, but I will have to start it over again, and it's no big deal. It's going to continue. I'm not letting anything stand between us and the stream. I've been delaying this for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Not anymore. I finally have everything going my way, thankfully. Knock on wood, let's not jinx it. Even my birds are excited. Aren't you guys? Not really. They're not. They're being their stupid selves, which I find endearing. I find endearing. All right. Now usually I come here prepared. Unfortunately, we missed the anniversary of the. Yeah, it is unfortunate. It was, I believe, 15th on the 15th. It would have been good to stream this on that day. Hello there, Neo Bolshevik Revolutionary. The first time I see you here. But we're going to be talking about Palestine. We're going to be talking about the United Arab Republic. We're going to be talking about what was formerly known within the context of the Cold War as the Third World, which is actually a word or a term I wish we'd stop using. I wish we stop using, and I'll explain why in a bit. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. A lot of things, because, past and present and future. This is a very important stream, and I chose May for it, because, as we all know, May Day is International Labor Day everywhere. It's an official holiday in a lot of countries, including my own. As well as on the 25th of May, which is this Thursday, it will be the 23rd anniversary of the Resistance and Liberation Day, when Lebanon pushed out the IDF from the south. Third World used to be a base term, Gaddafi, Tito, and Bosi. Well, it used to be an interesting term. We're going to talk about the history of it a little bit. But now from but now we can start and talk about these things. Hello everyone, this is Bad Our Boy, and we're back to another episode of Let's Talk. Let's Talk being our monthly stream to discuss a lot of things, a lot of topics, be it political or casual in nature. It's a very interesting and very important series that I want to keep going on my channel for as long as I can. Um, Now, I wouldn't say the Arab world has been the center of civilization, but I do have my own opinions on the matter. So, as we all know, I am an Arab socialist, and I am using, already outdated terms. I am a third worldist. I am a third worldist, and third world Maoism. Um, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. I am a third worldist, using outdated terms. I am an Arab socialist, an Arab nationalist as well. You know, you cannot be an Arab socialist without being an Arab nationalist. Even Arab communism has the spirit of nationalism within it. And I know there's a lot of opposing views regarding nationalism and socialism in general, and a lot of bad looks it might have. I am duly aware of all of that, and I'm ready to tackle all of this. And, as you can tell, my channel has sort of a socialist flair to it. Now, I try not to make my channel political. It's not for political content. I'm not here dishing out political content left and right. I'm not making video essays about politics. There's a lot of good channels about this. One of these good channels would be, for example, for short videos, 20 minutes, to watch them during a lunch break. There's Second Thought. I enjoy really the videos of Second Thought, the occasional video every now and then watching one. There's, of course, streams from a variety of left-wing streamers and YouTubers. The Lumpen Maoist, formerly known as the Lumpen Third Worldist, a friend of mine that had me on their stream as a guest, quite a few times actually over the last year and a half or so. If you check their channel, which is actually featured on the channel as of now. I'm not sure if soon I'm going to change up a little bit the look of the channel, add more channels, or maybe remove featured channels, but for what it's worth, it's featured as of now. It's the only channel featured as of now. Hello there, Buddy Cat, and do not call me a king, for I hate monarchism. Do I like Hakim? Well, actually, I'm not really... I didn't watch Hakim. However, I hear he has more of a Iraqi Baathist flair to him, and I don't think I'm too in line with Iraqi Baathism. Now, that's the deal with it. However, I think, progressive socialism, progressive socialist ethos are important, and especially when tackling history. And here's a problem that I do notice a lot, and hold on a second. In my haste to go quickly and fast, I forgot to send a link to two people I really hold dear to myself, two people I can call my comrades. Two Arab communists that I do adore. I do discuss a lot, I'm not a Marxist. I'm not a communist. I'm not convinced by communism. I do find communists to be a natural ally to myself, a natural ally to the broader progressive socialist cause, but personally, I am not a communist myself. What's idopole? Idopole can ruin the movement. Ideological politics? What's that? Identity politics. Okay, yes, identity politics. That's something that I want to talk about during this stream, and I want to talk about as well in July. Um, so, well, unfortunately, one of my friends are not able to come in here. Was Nina Andreeva right to support the Russian invasion? Ooh. Hitting up the big guns. Well, I'm just. I think it is appropriate to start with a general idea of socialism and national liberation. Let's start with socialism. Socialism, as most of you guys would know, considering you clicked here in the first place, socialism is an economic system where the workers own the means of production. The workers own the fruits of their labor, where the workers are not oppressed by another class, a higher class, where there's no social differences between people. This deep gap of wealth between people in a society. That's a general idea of what socialism is, what people would think socialism is. And national liberation. National liberation, as my birds are explaining right now, national liberation is, to put it in simple terms, it's when an oppressed nation rises up to reclaim its freedom. It has been seen a lot during the period of decolonization during the Cold War, breaking down the shackles of colonialism and imperialism. And usually, national liberation and socialism has been intertwined for a long time during the Cold War. And we've seen it a lot in what used to be known as the Third World. Socialism is when the government does stuff. When the government that cares about its people does what's good for its people. That's what socialism is. And doesn't really need a government, just need people to be good people. There's a lot of arguments against socialism, such as the horrible argument for human nature. Second Thought and Ugopnik both have a video about this, talking about refuting the argument that human nature makes us greedy and makes socialism a pipe dream, which is wrong. This idea that humans are evil is an old idea. It's an old idea. It comes from Thomas Hobbes, the guy that had the idea of the police state, saying that humans are naturally evil, and because they are naturally evil, they need a strong, centralized, powerful government to keep them in check. Then John Locke, of course, came and said, people are not evil. People are actually good. People are at their core good. However, their conditions, the material conditions surrounding them, it didn't say material conditions, but the conditions surrounding their life in a society would push them towards doing awful stuff. And that's why there needs to be a strong leadership, but also the people have the right to overthrow that leadership when it becomes too tyrannical for its own good. And then, of course, Jean-Jacques Rousseau came with the social contract idea, or the social pact. It's that the majority gives some of their rights so they can live together in a society. It's a little bit odd. National liberation and socialism were allies since 1917. Loneliness is a biological tool to make us stay around people. In hunter-gatherer times, if you are alone, you die. To be honest, I think you have to look at people somewhat cynically to be a socialist, because you have to acknowledge that humans did create a system of looser and control that robs resources from the poor. Okay, here's the thing. I believe wholeheartedly that humans are naturally good. We are naturally good. We are deep down good people. Because if you see, the most appalling of people are always the minority when you're talking about billions. That's why serial killers are such a rarity. Now, of course, you hear a lot of serial killers when it comes to, for example, the United States. And that's because, the United States is fucking massive. There's a lot of people there, so proportionally, the serial killers in the United States would be more than the serial killers in Bahrain, for example, considering the landmass and the density of the population. I do not view people as horrible. I do not view people as inherently evil. I view them, even if it's a bit too optimistic, I view them as good. Everyone is good, except the humans that are incapable of being good, people that are incapable of being compassionate, incapable of being empathetic or sympathetic. Sociopaths, psychopaths, the people diagnosed with an antisocial disorder. Because humans are naturally as social creatures. We need to live in a society or we go crazy. The society always starts with the individual. The individual is at the core of society. But each and every single individual is at this core of society, and each and every single individual coming together forms a society. This is the basics of understanding life as it is. Uh, Therefore, we as humans, we always started with the small gatherings of people. A small gathering of people goes from the small gathering to the family, to the tribe, and then to the city, or to the town, to the city, to the state, and then goes all the way across the world. We are in a time of globalization, or a time of you know, uh, internationalism, even though it's not the socialist type. But communication hasn't been as easier as it is today. And the very fact that I'm streaming to people from all around the world right now, people from France watching, people from Poland probably, people from the Arab world, people from Russia, people from the United States, everybody is watching. Informations haven't been easier to be communicated or to be discovered or found across. However, material conditions surrounding us will force us one way or the other. And I understand. I understand people like you guys are gonna say that humans are morally ambiguous. Generally, they do what they need to do, then what they think is right to do, but often what we consider right as a society isn't really right. I mean, that is true, but I understand your argument that humans are morally ambiguous creatures, and maybe so. Maybe so. I think, generally speaking, we all want to do good. Most of us, the crushing majority of the human population, wants to do good. However, what they believe is good can differ from one to another. Some people truly believe they are doing something good for humanity, or they're just screwing everybody's lives over. So, 100 300 years ago, most societies had slavery, something viewed as unanimously evil was viewed as right because it made life easier. But it wasn't viewed as right by everybody. And as you can see, it was due to the result of different progression of different societies. And through the progression of humanity, I'm not really a Marxist, but Marx did say that it all started with class warfare. It all started when the strong managed to force its hand over the weak, managed to take the lands, managed to take the resources, and subjugate the weak. And that's how it started. It wasn't right then. It's not right now. But it was for a long period of time how it was. And it wasn't because it was right or wrong. It was the natural progression of human beings, of the natural material conditions that put people through it. But I do believe that, and you might call it utopian. I do not believe so. But most people, the crushing majority, want to do good. Because goodness is a virtue. It was doing good in the past was a virtue. Doing good today is a virtue. However, what is good and what's not had changed as society had also changed. So that is a point that we need to keep point of. However, seeing that humans are voluntarily evil, well, I do not believe so. But yes, slavery is a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. And I do believe that all Abrahamic faiths would preach against slavery. And I am very saddened by the fact there was also a very large slave trade during the Caliphate, the days of the Caliphate, which really contradicts Islam and its human message. So now, different societies have different structures, and I want to talk about that more. So let's just look at Europe. We went from slavery to feudalism, from feudalism to monarchism, from monarchism, it had mercantilism at the time. Mercantilism developed into classical liberalism, and capitalism had started evolving from that. At the same time, another current that was a reaction to this building of capital from these people that had managed to retain power through inhumane ways, let's just outright say violence, murder, slavery, imperialism. And I know a lot of Leninists, a lot of communists would rush and say, well, the days of the Roman Empire cannot be called imperialist because it doesn't fit under Lenin's definition. But let's just say that for the sake of argument, for the sake of argument, for the sake of making things easier for everybody else, when a state or a nation or a group of people try to force their will by plundering their resources and subjugating another group of people, we can call that imperialism. Imperialism is oppression, and it evolved with time. It had many names: colonialism, imperialism, neo-colonialism, whatever. It had multiple names throughout the time, but it still falls under the same big umbrella, that is oppression of another, the oppression of one people by another. I will not say slavery was necessary. I do not believe slavery was necessary at any point in time to move towards feudalism or capitalism or post-capitalism, which would be socialism most likely or hopefully. I do not believe so. I do not believe that was true. Um, and I do not like the idea of justifying that slavery existed back then, that we can just justify it. Slavery is wrong all the time, and as long as there's one person enslaved in the world, humanity itself is enslaved. Funny enough, that's a quote from Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo himself was a supporter of French imperialism until he realized the French are murdering Algerians in droves in Algeria. So, yeah, yikes. Do I believe the levelers or diggers were proto-socialists, or do you think that's too anachronistic? I do not know what any of these two terms are. I'm not, an avid reader of communist literature or anarchist literature. However, I've been reading books, and I want to say that there has been a lot of different currents of progressivism throughout time. Islam, for example, was very progressive for its time. A lot of religious movements wanted to bring progress and slavery, feudalism, and the likes. A lot of liberals and Republicans back in the day, even though they're not socialists, they were progressives given the time period and how things have been developing. And I believe that all of these different currents of progress and liberation of the were usually or in majority pushed by the working class. I do not like the idea of proto-socialism. I do believe that socialism was uh, an organic result of centuries of progressive ideals, progressive ideas, and movements of different kinds, of different flares. I mean, Marx and Engels didn't write a Bible or a gospel. No, they were reacting to the material conditions at their time, within their knowledge, and they had different, they wrote theory, they rewrote theory, and so on and so forth, according to how things were unfolding around them. So, I might Google them later. It might mess up with my internet connection. My laptop isn't the best. But capitalism had evolved. And on this note, I just want to mention that capitalism is more progressive than feudalism. And even though capitalism is a horrible system, it is still way better than feudalism. And to say anything else other than that would be ignorance. We need to be scientific about this. That capitalism, as much as terrible it is, it's better than feudalism. So socialism. Now we reach these different progressive ideals of the working class, culminating in different positions. You had Marx, you had an Engels, Marxism, Leninism as time went by, anarchism, which was another flare of progressivism. You had liberalism, which also was progressive. Even liberalism in its socio-political stances, not its economic stances, because liberalism, it had two branches. It was the socio-economics, which was sociopolitics, which was the freedom of expression. People are born equal, but some people are different, have more advantages than the other depending on their individual skill. And then you had the economic branch, which was laissez-faire. Hello, SLR44. Thank you for coming. I'm really glad you could be able to join us. So socialism had also developed as a response to how capitalism evolved. And you had a lot of different stances on socialism, a lot of different thinkers, a lot of different positions. However, mostly, socialism has always been largely an ideology upheld by the oppressed against the oppressor, because it is the ideology that supports the oppressed against the oppressor. And that's what brings us to national liberation. As capitalism had evolved, through mercantilism did take an imperialist outlook to accumulate wealth through imperialist conquest. Europe had waged war across 3 continents, the Americas, Africa, and Asia, had waged wars of imperialism and expansion and colonialism, enslaving people, oppressing people, and all of the 7 major sins. And I'm not going to just say that Europeans are the only people that conducted slavery. As we had stated before, slavery was almost everywhere, and thankfully it's mostly dead by now. But Europe largely was the imperialist master of the world. It's carving up regions of interest, quelling rebellions, fighting imperialist conflicts within each other, and enslaving and oppressing and plundering the wealth of the world. And they even adopted this very fucked up system of international relations, which was one of the oldest systems of international relations. You had this system would apply between European countries because they were seen as civilized nations. Then you'd have semi-civilized nations. For example, Persia or Iran at the time, that people could conduct diplomatic, hold diplomatic relations with them through individual treaties. The international law between European countries would not apply to these countries. And then there were the third part, the third aspect, or the third class of nations, of people. Those were seen as uncivilized, were seen as land up to grabs, were seen as slaves ready to be sold, workforce ready to be used, and resources ready to plunder. That is factual. And over time, rebellions fired up, and eventually the ideas of socialism did spread, especially after World War II. Because after World War II, there was a new international situation. Because now there is a force, because by the end of World War I, there was the Franco-English, the Franco-British hegemony over the world. The Axis powers wanted to challenge that hegemony, which resulted in this inter-imperialist conflict known as the World War II, because Germany didn't want to liberate. It all started with Germany and Italy and Japan wanting to challenge French and British imperialism for their own imperialism, and trying to persuade oppressed people across the world that they are liberators. I mean, they tried a lot with the Arabs, using the radio as their main tool of propaganda, especially Italy. Italy was fighting by tooth and crook to get hold of the Levant from France. I've recently read a very interesting book about it, the Franco-Italian colonial struggle for the Levant. It's in Arabic, and it really shed a lot of light. However, it really had some points where I didn't really agree with, such as calling the Syrian National Party, which would later become the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, as a fascist party, or a party trying to leech off fascist empires, which is factually untrue. The SSMP never were fascist. They saw fascism and especially Nazism as absurdity, as more of a European bullshit thing. And they saw that both liberalism and socialism didn't really cut it for the situation in Syria, so they created their own school of thought. They named it Madrahiyya, which I am ready to study more about. Ali Pasha, who's Ali Pasha? Who's Ali Pasha? Like, which Ali Pasha are you talking about specifically? There are a lot of them. And thus, liberation ethos spread throughout these colonial footholds, these oppressed nations, and they upheld socialism as a path to liberation. And progressivism, because it just so happened that foreign imperialism had worked hand in hand with the local elite. And I'm going to take the Arab world as an example. The Arab world, you mean the one in Egypt who fought? Ali Pasha Urabi, the Arab nationalist Ali Pasha Urabi. Yeah, he had an interesting movement. I do want to read more about it. And he was also an inspiration for Abdel Nasser later on. But I want to talk about the Arab nation right now. The Arab nation as have been analyzed from a progressive socialist position by Ba'athist, and I'm going to recite now what I've read recently from a book called The Arab Vanguard, the secret organization established by Abdel Nasser to spread the Arab Revolution. It's a book published by the Center of Arab Unity Studies, and I'm not sure if it has an English version. I'm reading it in the Arabic version. Should Assad be allowed to return into the Arab collaboration movements? Syria is back into the Arab League, and I believe that is a very good development. I'm not really fond of the Syrian government as it is, but I do believe this is good news for the region as a whole, because right now we really need stabilization of affairs in the region, especially like the Iranian Saudi detente that happened and restoration of relations. That was such a relief, especially with the war in Yemen uh, almost over. The ceasefire is going to last until the end of the year, and then Saudi Arabia would withdraw and the war would end. So this is big news. Maybe it's not socialist winning, but it is big news. People are just getting a moment of breath from constant wars. And I'm really upset about what's going on in Sudan right now. Like, things start working out in Yemen, it goes to hell in Sudan. I feel this is a fabricated incident. This is a fabricated conflict. To keep, neo-colonial interests in position. Now let's talk about the Arab nation. The Arab nation, at one point, the Arab world was had its golden age in the days where Europe was still in the dark ages, were still struggling, and the Arab nation had been there, had been giving advancements in all fields, in all scientific fields, and it did its human objective, its duty to humanity to stop large invasions such as the Mongol and Han invasions from the east that swept across the world. The Arab nation stood as a bulwark to it in that region of the world, in West Asia. It brings stability and hope for the end of the genocide in Yemen and potentially cutting a peace deal to end its civil war. I do hope so. The Arab nation had flourished. However, slowly it started to dwindle, and then the Crusades have come. The Crusades come, and the Crusades were the first instance of European colonialism of the Arab world, hiding very cowardly behind the cross, hiding behind the banner of Christianity, which is fucking wrong. I'm just telling you that. However, they were driven out once. The Crusaders were driven out. However, eventually the Arab nation was overrun and invaded by the Ottoman Turks. And the Ottoman Empire, even though declared itself a caliphate, it was nothing than a mere monarchy that had regressed the Arab nation centuries, that had thrown this flourishing, united nation into darkness, into backwardness. And through that, the Arab refused this situation. And from that point on, their national awakening began, or their national reawakening began. I would argue that the Crusades were a power grab by the Pope, and he honestly didn't expect the results that he got, nor did the Byzantines, at least for the first one. It's so I'm just relaying what I've read, this analysis of the Arab revolutionary history, or the Arab struggle for independence and liberty, or the Arab nation, or the struggle of the Arab nation, because this has been, it's the Carter of the Arab Vanguard, which was written, I believe, in 1974. The organization didn't exactly upheld that Carter because it was a Nasserist organization, and they believed it was laced by Baathism. But I do find that it was a very interesting document because it split in two, the history segment and the theory segment, and I've read it and have enjoyed every little page of it. But I do believe maybe it was, the first step of colonialism. I mean, hey, we're still talking about the Pope. The Pope did have vast political power and vast lands and armies at his disposal. So you wanted a power grab? He was committing colonialism and imperialism, as we have defined it earlier on, even though if it's a broad and not detailed definition. It's so funny to think Assad was very content living his life as an eye doctor in London. His wife went to the same university as me before the Arab Spring. The university had posters of her. Ah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Now you have the Arabs seeing now they have been invaded. Their glory days are over. The Ottoman Empire thrown the Arab nation into the darkness and plundered it. The Ottomans occupied the Arab world for 400 years, and it had collaborated with European colonialism, with European colonial interests, being German, British, Austrian, or French, or even Russian and Italian. There was also European influence onto the Ottoman Empire. The first Ottoman bank was opened in London, for example. A lot of the railways were built by European companies. And I want to add something as well. The Zionist movement first started to getting a foothold into Palestine because of Ottoman policies, because the Ottoman Sultan sold off property in Palestine to the Zionist movement and helped them to build banks, helped them build the foundation of settlements in order to get money from European Zionists to run the stagnating Ottoman economy. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a historical fact. I'm not going to come here and start attacking Jews. This is wrong. I oppose Zionism. Zionism is an enemy of socialism. Zionism is Nazism trying to hide behind the Star of David. That's what it is. And a lot of Jews share that sentiment. A lot of Jews hate it. So now you have the Ottoman Empire in collaboration with European colonialism, with European economic influence. And you have the local elite that kept flip-flopping whenever it suited them. One time they're with the Ottomans, one other time they are Arab nationalists and liberationists. But the real people that really wanted freedom were the workers, were the farmers, were the intellectuals. They wanted freedom. And slowly but surely, the Arab awakening began. The Arab national awakening began under the Ottoman Empire. By the time the Ottoman Empire collapsed and German colonialism collapsed, and Austrian colonialism collapsed, by the end of World War I, and the Franco-British hegemony, formed itself around the world, and the Europeans came to the shores of the Arab world, invading them under the idea of a mandate system, which is just colonialism with an attempt of a human face. When that happened, these foreigners, when they came, the Arab liberation movement did not start because of them. When they came, the Arab liberation movement was already in full swing and was already on fire. The people wanted freedom and they were hoping for freedom, but however they have been lied to. They were promised their freedom by British and French support. However, they were lied to, they were deceived, and they were once again oppressed. And again, these foreign oppressors of the Arab nation had put in and had formed a class of collaborators to help them. A class of feudal lords that have been there to support the Ottomans now are supporting the Europeans. The Ottomans later did a U-turn, but there was really nothing they could do to enforce the policy change. No. But towards the end, the Ottomans were overrun by Turkish nationalism and wanted to Turkify all the regions of the empire. So now you had Italian, French, British colonialism taking place in the Arab world. And the Arab liberation movement wanted an end to this feudalism, an end to these elite collaboration classes, an end to occupation, an end to colonialism. And they wanted an end to division. because the Arab world was divided this time, divided among regions of interest, divided with collaborator governments and puppet regimes being installed in every little segment, every little fracture of the Arab world. Regions that cannot stand on themselves, that they do not have a history by themselves, that the only justification for their existence isn't really credible. And then colonialism, European colonialism, tried to start reigniting old, forgotten national sentiments, such as the Aramaic or the, Assyrian sentiments, and which made no sense because by that point, and through the development of history, the Arab nation, once it was flourishing, it had incorporated all these so-called minorities, all of these minorities, it had incorporated into them into a system of living side by side. They were a part of the Arab world, whether the Arabs liked it or not, whether the Europeans liked it or not, whether they liked it or not. They have become part of the Arab world. They have their own heritage, yes. They have their own cultural folklore, yes. But they formed a part of the Arab world, and it's the same idea when it comes to pan-Syrian nationalism of the SSMP, because there were natural, established human relations between these group of people that go for centuries and even millennia beforehand, that they are part of a greater nation together, a non-discriminatory nation. Maybe there has been discrimination at some points, but generally speaking, it was far better than what was going on in other places in the world, such as Europe. However you spell the okay, Phoenicians and Arabs were both Semites, by the way. So there was this incorporation, and some even argue that maybe Phoenicians are Arabs. Alexander called them Arabs, called Mount Lebanon Arabia. It was the Greeks that called the Phoenicians Phoenicians. It is so sad when people equate Zionism to Judaism. They have been so indoctrinated or deceived by Zionist propaganda. That is true. A return on allowing Jewish settlement. However, you spell the Carthage P like the... Okay, alright. Moving on. And the Arab people, once again, there was an attempt at deception by the Italians and the Germans using a lot of propaganda tools. However, unlike whatever some sources say, the relationship between the Arab liberation movement in all its forms and the Axis powers were very minimal. It didn't go past really light material support, if there was any at all, and just diplomatic relations, soft diplomatic relations, and empty promises. Promises that the Axis powers made to the Arabs, made to the British, made to the French, made to the Turks, made to everybody around the world. But at the end of the day, they weren't going to uphold any promise except the promise they made to each other. So by the time of the end of World War II, by the time this whirlwind of fascism that destroyed everything in its path has been snuffed out, there was a new situation in the world. Because after the success of the Bolshevik Revolution in the Russian Empire and the establishment of the Soviet Union, ideas of progressivism and national liberation did also spread, and socialism, they spread into the Arab world. Many Arab socialists did go and fight for the Republic in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, hoping that with the triumph of the Republic, there will be an end to Spanish imperialism. And with the end of Spanish imperialism, it will open the road to the end of French imperialism and the end of British imperialism. However, things didn't go as planned. The Golden Square was pro-Axis, though not hardline, and got minor support. The coup of Rashid Ali al-Kailani was... It's a period of Arab history I want to look more into it. It's a period of Arab history I want to look more into it. As well as the Syrian kingdom, the Arab kingdom of Syria, at the end of World War I. But now, with the triumph of socialism, there was a chance for the Arab nation. And it was just now a matter of when and where the revolution would start. After the Nakba of 1948, after the Palestinians were thrown out of their homes by war criminal Zionist gangs and were let down by these collaborationist governments that still bowed down to their colonial overlords, even though they got, in name, independence only in name. It was only a matter of time when a revolution would happen. And the revolution started on the 23rd of July 1952, where the free officers overthrew the Egyptian monarchy. This was the mother of Arab revolutions. At the time, it didn't really take the form of socialism. At the time, it took the form of national progressive democracy. Because Abdel Nasser at that time, the leading figure of the revolution, or of the coup, whatever you want to call it, he wasn't a socialist. However, he knew what were the aspirations of the Arabs, of the working Arabs, of the oppressed Arabs, and he was there to be the leading figure, because he spoke about ending feudalism, giving land to the peasants, because he spoke about ending imperialism, giving liberty to the Arab world, because he spoke about the end of the state of affairs, that is division within a single home, and spoke about unity in the Arab world. Once more, people loved him, and people surrounded him. They saw him as this icon for their hopes and their dreams. And by 1962, Abdel Nasser organically reached a conclusion that the only way to truly achieve unity of the Arab world, true liberty of the Arab world, was to achieve socialism in the Arab world. That socialism was the only way, that the state institutions are not the ones to conduct a revolution. It is the masses that need to be organized politically. That's why that's why he formed the Arab Socialist Union as a single party in Egypt, because it was going to be the political organization structure for the masses in order to conduct the true socialist revolution and make this jump from the progressive Egypt building towards socialism to the socialist Egypt, to the Egypt that's going to give freedom to the entirety of the Arab world. Egypt was the biggest Arab country, or the biggest free Arab country, the strongest Arab country. It had supported the Arab struggle everywhere. And revolutions started popping up across the Arab world, calling for socialism, unity, and liberty. And that's how, in the Arab world, socialism and national liberation became intertwined. In South Yemen, it was socialism that triumphed. In the Dhofar rebellion, even though it started off supposedly as a Saudi-backed rebellion, it had quickly evolved into a socialist revolution by the oppressed people in the Dhofar region in Oman. In Iraq, socialism had been brought. In Syria, socialism was attempted. In Algeria, in Libya, in Somalia, even in Lebanon, socialism was growing. Palestine, socialism and the liberation of Palestine, the work for liberation of Palestine was very intertwined. And here you can see that in the Arab nation, socialism, in all its aspects, be it communism, Baathism, Nasserism, had been a sweeping flood of patriotism, calling for unity, liberation, and equality of people, and ending capitalism, ending exploitation. And what more about what more example of socialism and national liberation can we see than in the Palestinian movement for liberation, in the Palestinian revolution? For it was a revolution, and it is a revolution until victory, until liberation. Many of these Arab movements, such as the Arab nationalist movement, had evolved into becoming the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And different communist and socialist and Arab progressive movements for the liberation of Palestine that armed themselves and trained themselves with the support of the Arab world, and were fighting to reclaim their homeland that has been stolen from them. Because in the middle of the Arab world, there was a cancerous tumor. A cancerous tumor that has been this ally to not only foreign colonialism and acted as a foothold for foreign colonialism and imperialism, but also as an ally for reactionary elements within the Arab world. And that is the Zionist entity, Israel. Israel is a rootless entity. It has no right to exist on this earth. Zionism was labeled as giving a land without people to a people without a land, which is very much wrong. There were people living in Palestine, people living all over Palestine, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Arabs, Armenians, and so on, and Arab, Armenians, Assyrians, and so on, and so on and so forth. You know, all sorts of people were living in Palestine. And these were foreigners that they came in, they were welcomed in, and then started getting armed by the foreign empires, started getting trained by the foreign empires, and were unleashed onto the Arab world as this last remaining bastion of colonialism, an excuse to keep meddling into Arab affairs. Israel, this rapist, colonialist, Nazi entity, they had one justification for their existence, and it was continuous warfare until they subjugate the Arab world, until they break the Arab back, until they cut off, the Arab will, acting as agents for imperialism. They are rootless. They have no roots to this land, no love to this land. That's why they're always scared, and that's why when the Arabs are bombed, they want to stay in their homes, even if they're getting murdered. All the three main Abrahamic religions come from Palestine. Not exactly. Judaism didn't start in Palestine. It started in the Levant, yes. Christianity did start in Palestine, the Holy Lands. And Islam started in the Hijaz region, in Mecca. But also it had spread to the Holy Lands. And I don't want to enter into the religious aspect of things. But the Zionists want to use religious arguments that even their own book, the Torah, refutes as not being religious. Basically. And by the way, let's just say this: the Zionists shook hands with the Nazis in Germany and broke the boycott against Germany for their own benefit, so they can get Zionist Jews out of Germany, so they can help them facilitate their move to Palestine to establish more settlements. The Palestinians fought and are still fighting for their lands. Recently, there was another round of conflict in Gaza and in the West Bank. Israel had used its usual strategy of assassinating leaders in the liberation movement. It was a strategy that they have used since forever to break the lines of the Arab liberation movement, and yet it failed, because those who are killed are replaced by people who are ready for revenge. And that was seen by the victory of the Palestinians in this last round of conflict, despite the casualties. And even though the Islamists today dominate the Palestinian resistance arena, it's not the only group. And the Palestinian resistance had formed a joint operation room encompassing all Palestinian armed forces, including the armed wings of the PFLP, of Fatah, the DFLP, and even the PFLP General Command, which is an Arab nationalist movement. Communists, Islamists, and nationalists of all stripes are fighting together for the liberation of their homeland. And this idea of liberation, of socialism intertwined with national liberation, spread across what was named the Third World. The Third World, which majorly is Africa, Asia, and South America. And it was called the Third World at one point because most of these countries in these continents decided to take a third position. Okay, wrong use of word. Not a third position. Third position is fascism. They decided to take a non-aligned stance, a positive non-aligned stance between the two major superpowers. They did not want to be standing with one against the other. They did not to be a place for proxy conflicts. They wanted good relations with anyone who wants good relations. So they worked. So most of these countries, they were known as the Third World because the first world being capitalist, the second world being communist, and the third world being non-aligned. Now, some third world countries chose to side with socialism. Others chose to side with the capitalist camp. But you can see that in the overwhelming majority of third world countries, socialism and national liberation came hand in hand, such as in Cuba, Nicaragua, Vietnam, Korea, Laos, Cambodia, the Philippines, even India. We've already mentioned all over the Arab world. In all of Africa, in South Africa, the fight against the apartheid regime, colonial regime, it was fueled by socialism. In Zimbabwe, which was once known as Rhodesia, another apartheid state. Burkina Faso, the Congo, Chile, as well, Bolivia, Guatemala, Puerto Rico, I would just say Puerto Rico even, wanted national liberation. In Chiapas, the Zapatistas in Chiapas. The people in Nicaragua were the Sandinistas, yes. So as you can, and a good point I want to talk about right now, since on the 15th it was the Nakba, but also at the same time on the 18th it was the anniversary of the martyrdom of the hero resistance fighter Mahdi Amil, also known as Comrade Tariq Hassan Hamdan. Mahdi Amil was also known as the Arab Gramsci. The Arab Gramsci that wrote a book, which I'm going to just read the title of مقدمات نظرية لدراسة أثر الفكر الاشتراكي في حركة التحرر الوطني. Theoretical introduction to study the effect of socialism or socialist rhetoric in the movement for national liberation. It's in their name after all, the National Liberation Zapatista Army, EZLN, but it's initial in Spanish, yeah. So this is a book by the Arab Marxist theorist and the freedom fighter Mahdi Amil, the Arab Gramsci. I wanted to shout them out. Assassinated on the 18th of May. He was with the Communist Party of Lebanon, fighting against Zionism and against repression and oppression and fascism. And now, since we've talked about the general outlook about the progress of socialism and national liberation using the Arab world as an example, because I'm more familiar with the Arab world, citing also different countries that had struggled for their national liberation in a continuous revolution. Sometimes there were hindrances, there were setbacks, there were disasters, but the spirit for resistance, the spirit to overcome all the troubles remained. So here we have now a good way to move on to the third world. I used to use the term third world and the term global south. Yes, Vietnam was very important. Vietnam actually was very important to the point some of the strategies during it, some of the strategies that the Vietnamese people used to fight against American imperialism were used by the Egyptians during the War of Attrition. But, such as creating anti-air traps, because, the Israeli kept bombing the anti-air system the Egyptians tried to build on the western side of the Suez Canal after the disaster of the Six-Day War. However, it was hard. So the High Command reached an agreement for the time being to use air traps or air ambushes by the AAs, which was hard because, it was really hard to dismantle an anti-air battery, a SAM battery, a surface-to-air missile rocket battery, move it across very rocky roads, bumpy roads, and then reassemble it quickly and expect it to work. And the Israeli planes were very fast and were having air supremacy at that point in the war of attrition. However, the Egyptian ingenuity managed to break record time for dismantling and assembling a SAM site and using it to ambush Israeli planes before then disappearing, before then, disassembling the rocket battery and then disappearing. It was ingenious. I was reading the book about the war of attrition and the military prowess of the Egyptians, the military strategy was just ingenious. Because, let's just face it, the Israelis and the Americans believed that after the Six-Day War, the Egyptians and the Arab world will not restore its military pride for 20 years, for 2 generations even. In 3 years, the Egyptian army had the upper hand in the war of attrition, which was a cornerstone in the anti-Zionist war and the anti-Zionist Arab struggle, because it prepared for the war, for the October War, which would have been more glorious if it wasn't for the betrayal of the Egyptian leadership at the time by the traitor Anwar Sadat. I want to find more about the Vietnamese-Cambodian War, but there aren't a lot of good sources. I would argue the tactics picked up from Vietnam were often the wrong lessons, like in Zimbabwe. Viet Cong was a very experienced fighting force, so often the forces trying to copy them, they didn't have the same level of ability to actually pull these tactics off. That is true, that is true. These things require training, but and experience. However, a lot of people would perfect it. I would say guerrilla warfare or semi-conventional semi-guerrilla warfare is a very good tactic used to attrition a stronger enemy, because mostly of these national liberation movements and guerrilla wars, it wasn't about driving out the enemy in a conventional mean, because the enemy has the technological edge and the firepower supremacy. So national liberation movements and national liberation guerrilla armies resorted to a war of attrition to, take as less casualties as possible while inflicting as much casualties as possible, and make the cost for the invader to stay too great for it to continue stay, too great to be justified. And I think the war of attrition that Egypt had conducted against Israel is really misunderstood and is really, criticized and often called the Soviet-Israeli war, which was untrue. Like the Soviet and Israelis throughout the entire war of attrition had like one air battle, which just ended very quickly to avoid escalation, and the Soviets just fought the Soviet Air Force just protected the inside of Egypt, like Cairo and other places, so that the Egyptian Air Force could and the Egyptian anti-air rocket systems can be built on the front lines, because when the Egyptians were trying to build their wall of rockets against the Israeli Air Force, Israel kept bombing the inside of Egypt and targeting civilians so that the government would direct forces off the front. And that's when Soviet support came in handy. I don't think in modern times, and by the way, victory is not measured by loss, it is measured by gains. And Israel itself is the Israel president, a former Israeli president or the current Israeli president, Weizmann, Isra Weizmann, I believe. He was a general during the War of Attrition, and he was the one that suggested Operation Prima, which I believe it was its name, which is basically fucking bomb Egypt to the ground. It resulted in Israeli planes falling left, right, and center. And then in his memoirs about the War of Attrition and the October War, he talked about the War of Attrition, saying it was the first war Israel lost against the Arabs. So it is a very misunderstood war and a very shat-on war by people who just look at casualties and say, look. The Israelis won this war. The Egyptians are coping. No, it's not true. Israel fucking lost. And Israelis usually hide their losses. They just say, like, Egypt could be fucking bombarding them across the channel, which happened, inflicting severe losses and injuries. And Israel would just say, just one guy was injured. And, the Israeli army like to say that their losses were minimal while their victories were greater than they actually were. And the Egyptians were also conservative in giving their estimation of the Israeli losses, because they did not want to lie, to accidentally give inaccurate information. During a week that was dubbed the week of the fall of the Phantom jets America supplied Israel with, Egypt said they downed 16 planes, which is a very conservative estimate, because the Egyptians had not only downed the plane, but to find the wreckage and make sure it's fucking destroyed. And that and if the pilot was captured, he needs to be behind bars, so they can say, we downed the plane and captured the pilot. They were very strict about that. I do think in modern times, best example for national liberation tactics are in Iraq, since it's harder to have conventional armies without the foreign support that enables building these armies. All of the West lies about losses. US, for example, doesn't count its mercenary casualties at all. Interesting. And guerrilla warfare was really conducted in Iraq against the United States occupation. Well, here's the thing now about the Third World. I used to use the word Third World, Global South, the colonized people, or the formerly colonized people. I used to use these terms, between the strong, but these terms are actually harmful. Nowadays, using the word Third World is now synonymous with poverty, lack of human rights, and high death rates, and perpetual civil wars and conflicts and refugees and murder and famines and disasters. That's what you hear when you hear Third World, which is the meaning, to say that the capitalists are the first world, the developed world, the strong world, the industrialized world, and the Third World is this shithole that is wrong. And then you have Global North and Global South. Global North and Global South aren't even accurate, because some of the countries that are considered as north are in the south of the equator, and some countries that are considered in the south are in the north of the equator. So this and even saying it's north and south even established a certain hierarchy: north above, south below. Then you have entities, terms such as developed and developing, and you have donor countries and donated to countries, or beneficiary countries, which is very used in the aid industry. The aid industry is also very toxic because it makes profit and doesn't really help. This humanitarianism doesn't really help people in need, because as one of the great revolutionaries once said, the African Che Guevara, the president of Burkina Faso, martyr of national liberation in Africa, great, great revolutionary Thomas Sankara said, "We do not want to be given food, we want to be given tools to farm our lands, to feed ourselves." Well, he didn't use these exact same words, but that was the rhetoric. Do not give us food, give us the tools for us to make our own food. We do not want to live off of charity. We are not a lesser people. And we should not accept being lesser people or be categorized as lesser people. It is insanity to be described as such. And then you have the resource rich and resource poor countries, which is fucking silly, because these, between quotation, third world countries usually have a lot of natural resources, but they are being exploited by foreign corporations. So already this is creating a self-loathing mentality, an inferiority complex, which is something we as socialists, as progressives, as people that espouse national liberation, unity and freedom, we should not fall into that trap. We should not call ourselves a third world. We should not call ourselves developing. We should not call ourselves less developed. We should not call ourselves shitholes. We are not shitholes. We are people with a history. We are people with a future. And we are people with a destiny. And we should not settle for anything less than a cohesive, good future for our children, for ourselves, for humankind as a whole. That's why I do not prefer these terms. And by the way, all of these terms, these are terms created by institutions in former colonizing countries or in imperialist countries, in research centers in the United States, in France, in the UK, in countries that have raped lands, enslaved people, and plundered resources, committed war crimes upon war crimes, genocide after genocide. And now we're going to settle for their terms? Settle for their mentality? Settle for how they look down at us? How they condescend to us? I refuse that. I refuse that. I refuse to have such a mentality. I refuse to have this inferiority complex. And sometimes I used to find myself self-loathing, saying, following that, we are the source of our problems. The Arabs will never rise because the Arabs can't rise. And I used to hate when I feel like that, because it's wrong. And I understand it's wrong. And I do not feel like that anymore. And I will not allow myself to feel like that anymore. I'm a human being with pride. We're not just the digits. We're not just pictures on a documentary about how life can be bad and how you should thank capitalism for all its goodness. We are fucking people, man. We have our lives ruined by foreign corporations, imperialist armies, and sabotaging intelligence agencies. So all of these terms, I despise them. I despise them. And it took a friend of mine to just point it out to me. And at first, I didn't really see it, but then I did really see it. I saw it clear as day. And that's why we need to find a better term to refer to the third world, to refer to the global south. Because these terms, global south, third world, they're antique terms now. They're outdated. They do not mean what they used to mean. So what can we call ourselves? Are we periphery countries with the imperial core, the capitalist imperial core having all the power? Maybe so. Maybe that's an interesting term. How about the neo-colonized people for the neo-colonized countries. Maybe that would work too. We don't have a set term right now, but this is a discussion that we must have around social circles, primarily in the quote-unquote third world. I don't want to see any fucking European, any Russian, American, Australian socialist trying to condescend to us, trying to argue for our sake, and argue with us what our regions should be called. It's fucking stupid. And I do. It's not. I'm not saying that these conversations should not be had among socialists everywhere. This is not what I'm saying by far. What I'm saying specifically is, and sometimes socialists in these capitalist empires fall into, and it's condescending towards people in third, quote unquote, third world. Condescending or trying to act as white savior or like a savior complex. We appreciate solidarity. We do not appreciate condescending. We do not appreciate a superiority complex. We do not appreciate being seen as inferior or lesser than. However, no, sometimes national liberation and this separation between colonized and colonizing. Tony Benn, could you remind me who Tony Benn is? And hello, Ask Benny. I do not believe I've seen you on the channel before. So I am waiting just, the explanation to your question so I can move on with the discussion. By the way, if anyone wants to chime in, give their opinion, you can join my Discord server. You can enter a voice chat and you can voice your opinion. We can have a conversation. This is a let's talk. It's not a let me talk. I do want to have this conversation going on between us. Tony Benn is perhaps one of the most important figures in Britain's politics. A great way to think of him is Bernie Sanders, but for the 1960s. Honestly, I do not know much about the labor movement or the social democratic movement in the United Kingdom, unfortunately. So I can't give an answer to your question because I do not have an answer to your question. I'm sorry about that. Maybe I could learn more about him later on in life. Not too sure. I'm from the Arab world, but more specifically, I'm from the Levant region. But if you check the description, or if you check the About Me section in the channel, the last section in the channel, it will tell you the location is Lebanon. So yes, I am from Lebanon. So yes, I am from Lebanon. Now, that being said, national liberation movements and the fight against imperialism was, during the Cold War and even before the Cold War, was usually painted as a fight against Western colonial empires because which Discord I am in? I am in my own Discord server. my own Discord server, which you are in right now, unless you're talking to us, Glenny, and that way, go on. So it was characterized as a fight against the West, because it was the Western empires that had, the Western European empires that had established imperialist footholds and colonies all across the world. However, this creates a problem. Yes, Magno, I will join in soon enough. I just want to finish this point so that we can continue it. Continue with the. I just want to finish this. I lost my line of thought. I just want to finish this point. Is that it has been characterized as a fight against the West, which had created a certain dichotomy that exists this day, that the West is evil and the East is good. The West is evil, the East is good. It comes still from the idea that the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet Union, had supported a lot of the national liberation movements who were characterized by socialism. But this is a very bad perception, a horrible perception. I'm not saying that Western empires or Western governments did not cause us pain, but that doesn't absolve some governments in the East from this. East versus West is also a very old and outdated sentiment. Even though, a lot of people would say the Russia-China multipolar movement, global movement against the American NATO unipolar movement is a valid fight to this day. But I do not see Russia or China as liberators against the West. If anything, it's just an inter-imperialist struggle at this point. So the way in the West there are a lot of people that oppose imperialism, that oppose colonialism, that oppose war, that oppose murder and genocide. When George Bush went to declared that America is going to invade Iraq, his popularity fucking plummeted to the ground. People did not like the idea of killing others. And people in America are also struggling. There are the homelessness issues there. The strife of the workers. It's an international strife. And now I'm not saying that there are oppression against from countries upon another, but the hatred towards other people from said countries is wrong. This us versus them. This is not the us versus them we should strive for. And we need to be rational. We need to be focused. The enemy is not another worker, another person, another student. The enemy, the true enemy, is that who possesses the power. Who possesses the power? Who possesses the power? I'm gonna tell you. Foreign banks, foreign corporations, international corporations, military institutions such as NATO. You have foreign intelligence agencies. These are the ones that hold power. Even locally, the elite locally, the capitalists locally, the neo-feudalists locally, the monarchs, the collaborators, the agents of foreign capital. These are the enemy. It's not another worker, it's not another student, it's not another human being. That's the enemy. This is the us versus them that we need to strive for. This is the us versus them that we need to strive for. It's this foreign exploitative capital, those who own it, those who use it and build institutions of oppression using it, and those who are fighting against it and being oppressed by it. Now I move on to What's aswordism? Imperialists are paper tigers. I mean, no, they can really pack a punch at times, destroy shit, and kill people. Caleb Maupin would like to know your location. I'm not really a fan of Caleb Maupin. Which is a massive number for a single rocket launcher. Oh yeah, today there were some drills. So what is aswordism? And now I'm going to join the general voice chat and give you guys the voice. But give me a little bit of time. It needs a bit of time to connect. And here I remove my earphones so I can hear you all clearly. Just give me a few seconds until I can get this working. Whew. You know, these Let's Talk streams are always taxing on the throat. Discord is not working as I had hoped it would.
Hello?
Hold on a second.
You hear me?
Hello. Hey, Nestor. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thankfully. Better than the last time we spoke. Uh, it's always great to hear your contribution to these streams. So go ahead, the floor is yours.
Um, well, I'm sorry, I wasn't quite ready. Um, do you think that a third intifada is about, and how do you think the Arab world is responding to the escalations going
Uh, well, I didn't hear the last part of the question. Could you repeat the last
on? What is your opinion of the response of the Arab world in general to the escalations occurring in Palestine?
part? All right. So, first things first. Will there be a third intifada? Of course. Of course, it has been building up for a while now. You know, every year since 2021, we've been asking ourselves, is this the year we see a third intifada? Because not only is now the resistance ramping up in the West Bank, and new groups are forming, such as the Lone Wolves and the Lions Den, and old groups are holding their grounds. And not only in Gaza are you know different armed resistance groups coming together.
Jenin have both seen increases in armed resistance groups.
And before I continue, I apparently I was a tad bit wrong about George Bush's approval rating plummeting. Apparently, they jumped by 20% in the build-up to the invasion of Iraq, and they gradually went down, and it was largely based on criticism that he wasn't doing the invasion well, and that American society got really bloodthirsty during the years after 9/11. Well, I've also seen a lot of anti-war protests, and I've talked to people who did join these anti-war protests back in 2003. So I do believe people were against that. But thank you for pointing that out, dear viewer.
It is a little complicated on that one because I believe like 10% of the American population was against the war, but of that 10%, it was pretty active. And especially within like the kind of groups that we run in, you're going to encounter those people a lot. But there is just a lot of general passive support for the war. At that point, people were just kind of believing whatever the government told them. So they were told Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and was involved with 9/11. and they were all like, "Sounds good to me." And it wasn't really until we were in there and losses started piling up that people started questioning, why are we really here? And that's when like leaks started happening, things like Abu Ghraib came out, and at that point, more and more people stopped supporting the war, and then they kind of acted like they had never supported the war to begin with, because a lot of them never really actively did. They just were kind of going along with whatever the news and the government was saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I know. So a quote from
You don't?
Kurt Vonnegut: "During the Vietnam War, every respectable artist in this country was against the war. It was like a laser beam. We were all aimed in the same direction. The power of this weapon turns out to be that of a custard pie dropped from a step ladder 6 feet high." And I mean, yeah, singing about stopping the war and holding hands and going "Kumbaya, my lord, Kumbaya" isn't gonna stop anything. That's why when they start talking about non-violence, it is bullshit. Violence is
No.
necessary. Violence is necessary for peace. No, violence as a response to violence is necessary. Only violence against people who have the tools of oppression, who have the power, who have the ability to conduct violence. For example,
Well,
you know, that's in the they keep saying that Martin Luther King was a pacifist. However, Martin Luther King also preached violence, the same as Malcolm X, a justful violence. And I have held the idea that you are no pacifist if you are not capable of violence. Then you are not a pacifist. You are simply harmless.
well, I'd also say that Martin Luther King Jr.'s role in the civil rights movement is certainly overplayed in a lot of modern American media. Not to say that he wasn't one of the most important people of
They're trying to
the
blue
movement,
wash
he
him.
definitely was. But yeah, it's definitely whitewashing. It's look at Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and they don't talk about Malcolm X. And when they do, it's very little. They don't talk about Nigel Farage. Like, they don't talk at all about the people who came the generation before. Like, are you familiar with Paul Robeson?
I think I've heard the name before, but I'm not too sure where.
He is actually a very interesting character in the civil rights movement because he was born to a former slave,
Yeah.
and he ended up becoming a lawyer, an actor. He played professional football. He he was a singer. He sang like Old Man River. He was one of his most famous like things. And he was a active civil rights activist who was campaigning for like the liberation of Africa, as well as black people in America. And he got like kicked out of the country by the House of Un-American Activities and stuff like that.
The precursor to the FBI, I believe, right?
What?
Wasn't the House of Un-American Activities like the precursor to the FBI, or?
No, they were like a group, a congressional committee
Huh.
that was there to basically determine anti-American, which meant like communist or leftist activity, and then punish you accordingly. That's like when people like got kicked out of Hollywood and stuff like that. Like the second Red Scare, that's like the trial, basically. It's the House of Un-American Activities.
It's fucking horrible. There's a lot of interesting things in the civil rights movement, and the civil rights movements of many of the country.
Well, what's funny is his actual like interview with them is recorded, and he pissed them off so much that they like kicked him out like 10 minutes in
The
because he was a lawyer and he was like an orator, and so he was just fucking with him because he was like capable of actually like
no,
easily holding his ground with him.
if everything goes according to plan, I'll be a lawyer in like 2 years from now, so I can respect
That's
that.
awesome.
I can respect that guy. Yeah, I think this year is my graduation year from. I get my bachelor's degree in law, and then I need to do my magister. I don't know how to call it in English, but it's like the M1.
Masters.
Not it's between the bachelor's and the master's.
Oh, okay.
It's like once I do it's 1 year. Once I do it, I can apply to the exams to enter the bar association or the lawyers union, as we call it here. And
School?
not school, the lawyers union.
No, I said that's cool.
That's cool. Basically, becoming a lawyer in training, 3 years. Then I have to do another
Yeah.
exam, which will make me a bona fide lawyer. Then, after 7 years of being a bona fide lawyer, I can start accepting new trainees.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I had to memorize that. I had an exam about these things.
That's how would you describe like the Lebanese legal system?
It's heavily inspired by the French legal system. It's that of the Third Republic, and a lot of the jurisprudence that later eventually turns into legal changes are inspired by the French judiciary and legal reforms that happen every now and then, which is something that I do find not too good. Not too good. It's bad, actually. It's bad. We need to be an active justice. We need an active justice system that can reform the laws without waiting for any other country to reform it. It's been 100. It's been over 100 years. It's been this September it'll be 103 years since Lebanon was founded in the way it is under France, and by November I think it's going to be like the. Hold on a second. Between 43, 40, 60 years. 60 years, I do it 20 years. It'll be the 80th year since our independence. Would be like an 80, like would be 103 years old, and 80 years since independence, and we're still following the French justice system and going at a snail pace. And right now, because of the social and economic issues that Lebanon is going through, the justice system also is going through troubles of its own. Hopefully, in the future, things will get better. But now,
it can't be a very functioning system itself, just with all the amount of governmental issues that go on. At least at like the meta level, like with the Supreme Court and whatnot. I imagine that's not a very functioning body. You know what I mean? I can't imagine the Supreme Court of Lebanon gets a lot done. Because like if the U.S.'s can't,
we call the Supreme Court over here the محكمة الجزاء. التمييز, which is, I don't know if it's I can say that in English, but it's like the cassation court. It's the Cour de Cassation in French. It's not a level in the judiciary system. It's not like the third level where you basically go to the first court. You don't like the judge. You do not like the judgment. You appeal it. Then the court of appeal will restudy it. And if you do not like its decision, you can then take it to the highest court in Lebanon. And that high court does not look into the case itself, does not look into the material aspects of it, of what happened, of what each side is claiming. It looks if the court of appeal and the other courts beneath it had applied the law well. If it did not apply the law well in Lebanon, it can look into the case itself and dismiss it. In France, it's different. In France, it breaks the decision of the Court of Appeal and sends it to another Court of Appeal. However, if it happens every so often, it's the same case getting appealed and sent to that court, and then the court breaks the appeal and sends it to another court, and the court, if it goes like a ping pong game back and forth, eventually the high court in France will just say, fuck it, this is something new, we need to make a decision about this case, and this case would lead to a justice reform in a certain point in the law, which is something. It's the French law is more dynamic than the Lebanese law.
So the Lebanese model doesn't really have the power to change the law and society itself.
I don't think it doesn't have the power. I think there is a certain cold within it. It's this certain
So
slow
it's not,
movement. It's a very slow
because I
movement.
would imagine it would be mired by sectarianism.
Yes,
Just with the way the rest of the country is structured, like the presidency and cabinet, like the way that you have to have a certain amount. I'd imagine that the amount of judges is also
well, maybe.
structured out.
Well, I'm not too sure because a lot of people who enter through their mastery of the law. They enter through exams and tests. However, sometimes there are sectarianism does bleed into these things. Sectarianism is a disease that leads into every aspect of society, and it should be wiped out. Now, back to your original question. If a third intifada is coming, possibly, hopefully, the Palestinian scene has been boiling up for now, and now the two big giants of the Palestinian political arena, Fatah and Hamas, last year solved their differences in Algeria after having problems for years. And a new Palestinian election will take place towards the end of the year. I believe towards November. It will be a year since the agreement
Do
between
you
the
think
two
it will
factions.
actually happen? That election?
I do
Because I'm
believe.
always skeptical when I hear about it.
I mean, listen, it's a good step because Fatah and Hamas are the two political giants in the Palestinian arena. And for them to resolve their differences and work together, it is a huge boost for the Palestinian cause and for coordination between Palestinians. A house divided cannot stand.
Do you think that the renewed Palestinian elections would be good for the Palestinian left? At least, I'd imagine that Fatah would suffer a lot of problems. Or at least, like, they would lose the dominance that they had in the last election.
Well,
But
it's
do you
not.
think that, like, other groups within the Palestinian left will be able to kind of recover in that seat? Or do you think it will be kind of swept by Hamas and PIJ?
Well, I do not think. I'm not too sure about that. I'm not too sure about anything. I think it's best not to make speculation, especially it's like not. It's going to be months from now, so it's better not to make speculations too early.
That's fair.
But I do believe, I think that'd be like a 50-50 situation, possibly. But in all situations, it's good to be fighting on all fronts. Whether it's the civilian resistance or it's the military resistance, resistance on all fronts is needed. They complete each other, and the fact that they agreed on a new Palestinian general election since like forever it's good. Even though the PA is like under the Israeli thumb, it is a good idea. It is a good thing. It's always positive. It always.
Do you think? What do you think of the demographic crisis in Israel? Do you think that that's going to create more problems?
Oh, let me tell you, the policy that's being pursued in the last few years, especially now by far-right Israeli governments that have not only stirred up the Arabs but also stirred up Israeli society itself. It's going to bring Israel to its downfall, possibly, because the more you start attacking a people, driving them towards the edge, kicking them out of their homes, getting settlers in, trying to Jewify, as they're saying, to Jewify the West Bank, for example, Jerusalem, Gaza, it will backfire immensely. Because the more the Israeli government and the Israeli Zionist institutions push on the Arabs, the more the Arabs are willing to fight for their lands. It's
not only that, but I do think, on a broader geopolitical sense, as Israel moves further right,
it's the public opinion against them in the international community. Yes.
Well, yeah, like the international community is going
to stop
and
supporting.
We all know the international community means the West, like the U.S.
And even the West,
especially like the U.S. the U.S. is its most important area, and it's losing a lot of support amongst young people, partially because American young people are becoming more and more leftist, and the
even as they grow
government
up.
of Israel. Yeah, even as they grow up. Though I would say they're not. A lot of them are just liberals, but even that, like,
It's better than
more
not.
yeah. But it's better though. It's less fucking neocon outright genocide of
Definitely.
entire countries over 20
I-
years.
It's totally better than the devil of Florida taking the
Yeah,
White
don't even
House.
get me started. The policies, I don't know if you paid attention, but he's been passing far right policies
I've
to
been
appease
hearing,
his
I've been
base.
hearing, I've been hearing. He's been using, sometimes even using the media outrage against other issues
Yeah.
to pass secret, to pass
He's
laws that
Yeah, he's
will go
been
under the
trying
radar.
to crack down on homosexuality, trying to crack down on illegal immigrants. Um, he's retroactively legalized him illegally kidnapping people and shipping them across the country. And he's trying to make it so that the Florida government has the right to revoke driver's license issued by other states to illegal immigrants, which I know doesn't mean a lot to like Lebanese people or like non-Americans, but the idea of like a state just overriding another state's decision like that is kind of insane.
Yeah, that is
And you guys,
that is bad. That is, I think that the federal forces, the Supreme fucking Court should interfere in that. The Congress, the federal Congress has have authority to to overrule anything the local, the state, the state legislative passes, and even if you forget about all of the policies, his history is fucking grim. Like hearing about
yeah.
what he did in I didn't yet hear what he did in Iraq and in the American prisons in Iraq, but I heard what he did in Guantanamo Bay, and I'm telling you, this guy is a fucking devil.
He's also, yeah, like when he was a teacher, he went to a party with like underage girls and was like caught on a picture drinking with them and shit like that, which is hella suspicious.
I mean, I'm not
Or
fucking
like,
surprised. But
no, I'm not either, but
what's funny is
yeah.
that he's trying to paint himself as the Trump that Trump never wear, while Trump is shitting on him, calling him pudding man.
Yeah, well, that's what's fun. I don't know. I feel like he's not gonna win the primaries just because he had his chance, kind of, for a little bit, but he was never gonna be able to properly execute on it. And I do think he's not gonna be able to take off. He's losing the right wing support. The left hates him. It's not looking good for him.
I hope so as well. Now, to the second part of the question, what would be the Arab reaction to such a thing? Well, let me tell you, Arab people always, always, always are in support of Palestine. Sometimes you'd have these fucking idiots who would just say, no, we want peace with Israel, but Palestinians are just terrorists and whatnot. And now even, there's a change of heart even in the Gulf states after the Saudi-Iranian detente. I think
was
that
actually going to ask about that.
Yeah.
The Gulf states especially.
So I do believe there will be an immense support for Palestine. Let's go back to 2021, the another round of conflict in Gaza, and it was because Netanyahu's government, I believe, it was Netanyahu back then. He was also pushing people out in Jerusalem, putting settlers in. The Palestinian resistance warned it will take drastic measures if that doesn't stop, gave an ultimatum. The time for ultimatum has passed, and not 2 minutes before the ultimatum expired, they fired a rocket at Jerusalem, which was a first. And then it started, the fighting started, and things have changed since then. People went in masses in Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. They went to the borders to protest, holding Palestinian flags, denouncing the divisions created by Sykes-Picot, by the British and the French, these colonial divisions, denouncing them, renouncing them, calling for unity of the Arab people against Zionism and solidarity with the Palestinians and their cause. which is the focal and central struggle for the Arab nation.
Do you think if Hamas enters into open conflict with Israel in the next few months, that Hezbollah will respond in support? Because I've heard some claims of that.
All right. I'll explain. I've heard a lot of things, but Hezbollah's position is that if Israel keeps targeting Jerusalem, if Israel, the Israeli government and its military keep committing these stupidities, they are going to start a regional war. They're going to start a regional war. A war in which Hezbollah will play a part in, the Houthis will play a part in Yemen, because the Houthis now have drones that can reach Palestine. And the Palestinian resistance will play a role in it. Syria will play a role in it. The Arab world will play a role in it. Like Hezbollah doesn't want war. No, we are a peaceful people. The Arabs want peace, but there is a war that is forced upon us. Do we just sit down and get slaughtered? Is that what they call peace? That's called surrender. I'm not a fan of surrender, honestly. I'm not a fan of getting silently slaughtered. I'm not a fan of that. I'm a fan that if you get bombed, you fucking defend yourself and retaliate. An eye for an eye. An eye for an eye. And I know there's this whole an eye for an eye makes the world blind, but hey, I'm not the one punching first. I'm the one getting fucking ripped to shreds by bombs.
I mean, that's from Gandhi, and I'd argue that he's not the best source for national liberation.
I mean, Gandhi was a symbol, but Gandhi,
he wasn't like Bosa, like other. There were Bhagat Singh. There were a lot of other much more violent, like the Indian Navy mutinies of 1947.
I mean,
all those things were, you know what I mean? Like those were what drove the British out, not Gandhi doing assault march.
Gandhi was simply a symbol. It could I think,
but he wasn't even the predominant symbol.
Yeah,
Gandhi's definitely overplayed because the British always talked about Gandhi
because they want to use him. They want to use Gandhi. They want to use the Gandhi rhetoric. Because colonialists, once they lose, they know they're losing. They want a failsafe. What's like the least damaging icon they can prop up and say he was the guy that led the revolution? And
but they use that to basically brainwash American children. At least I know that for sure because growing up, we were taught that it goes Gandhi freed India, Martin Luther King freed black people. Both of those were done by nonviolence. That's the way you solve problems in society, is through nonviolent protest. And that's bullshit, you know what I mean? But that's what we're taught as children all the way up until college, essentially.
I mean, that's also what we are taught to some extent. It's like a globalized ideas. And the SLR says that an eye for an eye wouldn't apply here. It's more revolutionary violence versus reactionary violence. The violence of the oppressed to free themselves versus the violence of the oppressors, and I do agree with that. But when I said an eye for an eye, it's to say that we are not the first to throw the rock. We are acting in self-defense. And it's not our fault that when we do self-defense, we do a lot of damage.
Well, I would also argue that if you're a colonist, I don't really feel bad. That's the thing, that's just kind of what people do when you try to take their home and kill them. They fight back. You don't want to portray, these poor settlers in fear for their lives and their children, and it's well, you brought your children to an active war zone. I'm a father. I would never move my child out to a country that is actively being stolen from another group of people out of, some book that's 2,000-year-old's claim and then expect everything to go well. You know what I mean? You're putting your children into that situation.
That is one way to
They're
look at it.
choosing to go there.
By the way, SLR, what's Nakam? Can you please explain that? Now about this. Now some Israelis, some Israelis that were born after a certain time period, born on occupied Palestine, they know nothing else than occupied Palestine, and they're forced to fight the wars of Zionists. They're forced to join the IDF or face prison. They're also put in a certain predicament. And
So I'm talking about the settlers themselves, though. Like when people try to elicit sympathy for settlers.
I'm not. I'm not. This is not a sympathy for settlers.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to say is, I do not. I don't think I hate those people who didn't have a word in where they were born. I hate the system that they were born under. I hate the institutions that they are forced to serve in, and I hate the policies they make. I like to say that on some level, Jews are a little bit of a victim because they've been dragged they crawled out of death camps in Europe just to find themselves shipped off to the Levant, and given weapons by colonial empires, pointed them at the native people of the region, the Arabs, and told them, yeah, you want a state, you need to kill these guys. And fast forward here, we are, endless fighting. It's not to say that I think that Israel has a right to exist. On the other hand, I do not. It's it's
Well, I do
it's
think that there's a valid distinction between those who live in already occupied territory that was established when the state of Israel was, and those that are actively seeking to expand the state of Israel.
okay.
And that's
Okay.
what I'm talking about
Yes, that's what I'm
when I'm
talking
talking
about.
about
Okay.
like settlers.
Yeah, like fuck settlers, fuck settlers. Those who are actively
Yeah,
stealing homes, fuck them. But I mean,
that's what I'm saying. It's
realistically,
like there should not. Yeah.
realistically speaking, slogans such as "throw the Jews in the ocean, in the sea," which sometimes it's attributed to Abdel Nasser, which is actually wrong. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Abdel Nasser who said that. Abdel Nasser said, it's not Abdel Nasser who said it, I think it was the first General Secretary of the Arab League that said this, that we should, it's going to be this war, the war of 1947, 1948, the war against the establishment of Israel is going to be a major war where a lot of genocide will happen, and where the Arab armies will attempt to throw the Jews back to the sea from where they came from. I think that was the quote in its entirety, more or less. It's not Nasser who said that. But yeah, I think realistically speaking, the only way for Israel out of this situation is because it's to just drop their rhetoric, drop their far right aggressive push, drop their weapons, and enter into negotiations with the Palestinians.
I don't. My only issue is I don't think that might be realistic for the Israeli state now, but that is not going to be realistic in the future.
And let me tell you, because if they
Like
truly,
Israel,
if Israel truly wants peace, it's not going to be what they call peace between quotations. It's not going to be the surrender and the genocide of the Palestinians and the silence of the Arab world and the international community. No. If they want peace, there's one way for them to have peace in this region, to remain in this region, and it is to enter negotiations with the Palestinians, to stop the occupation, to drop their weapons, and to form a single state, a Palestinian state for that matter. If they want to stay in here, they want to live in peace, they have to make concessions. They have to give Palestinians their right of return, they have to give Palestinians their state, their homeland back, and they will be allowed to stay there and end the bloodshed. You know,
I
it's
mean,
not.
I agree. I think, though, realistically, if you look at the demographics of Israel, the people that are living in Israel are less and less secular people. They're not the kinds of people who view this as a negotiation between two states. They view it as a war between two religions. If you look at like the rise of religious Zionism in Israel, that's going to keep rising. There's not going to be, the Jews of the former Soviet Union coming back, or Holocaust survivors that many of them were influenced by labor movements. You know what I mean? Those groups that were somewhat a moderating force in Israel's history. Not to say that they are innocent of bloodshed.
I mean, honestly, fucking labor Zionism was the worst. Not only does it call
religious Zionism.
No, labor Zionism. Like, they call themselves
labor Zionism.
Like, they're the ones who established Israel. You know, they're the first government in Israel, and they who conducted the war in Israel, who unified the Zionist gangs of Israel into the IDF, and who went after Egypt in 1956, the Ben Gurion governments.
Yes, but what I'm saying, though, is that group, as radical as they are, look at the group of the religious Zionists that they allied in that initial period. And even more radical groups.
I mean, listen,
those groups are becoming more mainstream, is what I'm saying. Groups
okay, so I understand what you're saying. I want to
total eradication.
I want to
Palestine.
I want to clarify my position so it does not get misinterpreted by people reading listening to this, watching this later, whatever. What I'm saying is the only way for Israel, if they want to live in peace, is to do the sensible thing and stop their occupation and enter negotiations, dismantle the IDF, the Shabak, the Mossad, and start figuring out what to do. Enter, like, for example, in the economy, what institutions should we dissolve? What should we keep? What new institutions should we form? And stuff like that. For example, the economy. What about the military? What about the politics, the legislative, the judiciary, the social sector? How to integrate, these two formerly fighting groups together. That is.
I agree with that, but I don't think the state of Israel as it exists will ever be able to do that.
However, as long as the policies of occupation, apartheid, and genocide continue, there is one clear path, which is armed resistance until victory. What I'm saying is not a call for the Arab resistance or the Palestinian resistance to drop its weapon. At the contrary, my call and my reasoning is that until the Israelis truly decide to take a step for peace, the Palestinians have the holy right of resistance, a right guaranteed by international law, a right guaranteed by morality itself, to fight and protect themselves and resist occupation and genocide and slaughter until victory, no matter how long it takes till victory. Because the alternative is being slaughtered.
No, and I agree. And I do think, unfortunately, that kind of negotiated peace is not politically possible with modern Israel. And I think it's going to be less and less politically possible as time goes on.
Well,
I think that in the 90s, there was a push in Israeli society, not entirely, but there was a swing towards, I guess, somewhat more left-wing kind of, like, forces. That's why you were able to
there were peace talks between Syria and Israel in the 90s, all through the 90s.
Yes.
Negotiating.
That's what I'm saying,
but Israel thwarted that.
Government forces were never able to gain enough power. The forces that were pushing for peace with its neighbors and ending occupation will never gain enough power in Israel to make that a political possibility.
What I think, okay, honestly, you're right, but I think when Israel reaches that point, it's when Israel is truly fucking desperate. It'll be an act of desperation, a final cry for survival.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They have to. That will be.
They have to be brought to the fucking brink.
Like, they have to be dragged to the table.
It's not. It's not going to be out of the kindness of their own hearts. They're going to be dragged there. They're going to have to be brought to the brink, to be pressured because, there's a dilemma in Israeli society right now. Would Israel survive long enough for its 80th birthday? It's the 8-decade curse for Israel, because apparently they say that no Jewish state, quote unquote Jewish state, was ever remained established for more than 8 years. And then there's the protests against the far-right government of Netanyahu. There's cold relations between the United States and Israel. The international community is giving the stink eye to Israel, and the Arabs are now more than ever ready to respond to Israeli threats against Palestinians, especially that now the any hopes for a Saudi-Israeli axis, or an Arab-Israeli axis against Iran that America was trying to form, the United States was trying to form, it's gone. It's gone with the Iranian Saudi detente. And I'm not saying that the Saudi royal family is good. However,
or that they're going to actively support the Palestinians,
or that they're going to actively support the Palestinians, or that this detente or this state of calmness will continue to remain, or that this wasn't an act of
even
Chinese
a real
influence.
Not, because in a lot of ways it's just an acknowledgement of political reality. It's not really like
No, I think it's
like,
also
like in Yemen they're just finally acknowledging they've lost. You know what I mean? Like they've lost that. They lost that war over 5 years ago.
And I think that
but
China, it's also a move by China to spread its influence into the Middle East further and further, even though they're having their own problems of their own, China right now, their own economic troubles.
They definitely are, but I think China's economic problems, like the U.S. is also having economic problems.
Yes,
right now.
but by far the U.S.
And I think
would
the
still
problems the U.S. is having are worse than what China's having right now.
All right. So the thing is, right now is, I'm not here saying that, Saudi Arabia is any good, but anything that lowers tensions in the region, especially like the Turkish-Syrian normalization discussions and conversations and the meetings, they're good. I don't think that the Erdogan government is any good. They supported terrorists for a long time. They invaded Syria. They bombed Iraq. They bombed Syria. They genocided people.
What they've done to the PKK in Turkey itself.
They've done horrible shit. But at the same time, they're the last thing standing in support for the northern terrorists in Syria.
And Israel too. They're the pro-Israeli force in the Middle East.
And if Turkey finally fucking stops that, retreat, and shake hands with Syria, then we can say that the Syrian war is over. Syria is back into the Arab League. It's over.
I mean, it already has essentially been over. There's not much fighting in the Badi province itself. Because, you know what I mean? Like, they're just finally acknowledging their political realities, and a lot of that U.S. is gone. Or not gone, but it's weakened in the region. That's enabling actual acknowledgement of political reality, and not just dancing to previous tune.
Now, SLR had explained about Nakam was a hate group. It was a section of the Jewish partisans that fought Nazi Germany, and after looking at the horrors of the Holocaust, they decided to enact revenge on all Germany. This included anti-Nazi Germans, socialists, and even some Allied forces due to them not acting up when the race laws started. They swore to kill 6 million Germans. They wanted to poison wells and rivers. Oh, holy shit, I heard of these people. That Kovner guy, I think, was their leader.
Avner Krovna.
Yes.
Was his name. Yeah, no, honestly, I don't entirely blame him. He went through, he was in, fucking Belarus and shit like that, the shit he went through. He was very angry at the Germans.
I understand that, but also, blind hate is bad, it's horrible.
Definitely, but he kind of thought that the Western allies were letting them off too easy, and he wasn't wrong. That's the issue.
I mean, that is true, but enacting revenge against all Germans, poisoning wells and rivers...
No, I agree. I agree that he went too far. But, what the plan B's for the members were? Was, some of them were actually enacted. One of them was a baker brought bread to the SS, and he had poisoned it. So there were 100 SS prisoners in this French castle, and he poisoned the bread, and 90 of them died.
Interesting. But yeah, my sentiment when it comes to...
he only got a couple months of prison time for it. They gave him a complete slap on the wrist for murdering 90 people.
I mean, they were SS, so... Hmm.
Yeah,
But
no, they deserved it. Like that's.
here's the thing. Here's the thing that I want to say is my sentiment when it comes to national liberation and resistance is it doesn't matter who's holding the rifle. What it matters is that they know who they point the rifle at. Blind hate is terrible, horrible, and a hindrance and a setback to any true national liberation movement. Well,
I don't think it was really for national liberation. It was more like you guys killed my family, I'm killing yours. It was much more personal revenge than it was
okay, yeah, sounds
a
like it.
grand political bill.
One of the leaders became a military officer of the IDF. It's really absurd to me. Those who had
Oh no,
crawled
one
out
of
of
them, yeah.
those that have witnessed firsthand the horrors of Nazism were trying to enact it upon Arabs. It's fucking crazy. Could say he changed his target from 6 million Germans to 6 million Arabs. Holy shit, that's true. Well, I was wanted to also say something beforehand before we talked about Nakam. What was it? Let's rewind a little bit back. Before we talked about Nakam, what did we talk
Um, we're talking
about?
about
Yes. Okay, I remember. I remember now.
Syria, like the
Yeah,
Middle
yeah, yeah,
East.
yeah. I've seen some socialists, Arabs living in diaspora or living in the homeland saying that I'm going to quote this about the Saudi-Iran restoration of relations. Scum restoring relations with garbage, facilitated or negotiated uh, by shit or something like that. Like I understand Iran isn't a socialist country, but Iran did a lot for the resistance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. My
Saudi
opinion of
Arabia
Iran.
is definitely a horrible country on the international stage. You know, it has a horrible regime, and China is not this socialist paradise or this power of national of liberation against imperialism. It is imperialist itself in its attitudes.
So I would agree. I would say though that a shifting away from the U.S. at least enables a more multipolar foreign policy.
Well, it's not just
The
about
fact that U.S. hegemony is weakening, I think, means that the Middle Eastern people have a lot more freedom in their own action.
well,
which I think
well,
is
that
good.
is true, but this point exactly is maybe people do not like Iran, Saudi Arabia, or China, but it does not change the fact this had eased tensions in the regions immensely, and it's going to bring an end to the war in Yemen, which was a fucking humanitarian disaster. It will bring an end to the war in Syria, which is also a humanitarian disaster. It might even bring an end to the war in Libya, which is a humanitarian disaster.
Which,
And
by the way, all
even
of
in
these were
Iraq,
engineered by the United States.
those who espouse Arab nationalism against Iranian invasion and side with the Saudis, and those who support the resistance against the Saudis, Saudi influence, and Israel, and side with Iran. This will lower tensions all over West Asia.
Yes, I agree. Have you, by the way, have you ever read about the Iran-Iraq War?
I know a few things about
Like,
it.
about just the tactics that were used in it are fucking insane.
Trench warfare, basically.
What?
It was World War One, but in the Middle East. Oh, by the way,
No,
yes.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about, like, guys dressed as the Mahdi riding on, like, white horses in the machine gun fire with just, like, banners as a, like, no weapon. Like, leading guys just dressed in, like, red t-shirts and cargo shorts into the enemy line, and they're just, like, jumping over barbed wire and shit. Not even clearing it with artillery.
What the fucking shit? I mean, yeah,
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm saying. It's, like, crazy. It's so much crazier than just World War One in the modern day. It's like fucking like actual holy war.
Okay, and I understand saying God is with you, God is with us in the fight, but to the point of just not using a weapon and jumping over barbed wire over white horse, it's what? Like, dude, chillax.
One of them, like a survivor, was literally talking about how they were drowning the enemy positions in their bodies. And he's like, it was glorious. And it's like, dude, like, how the fuck are you alive? You're lucky. Like,
Human wave tactics evolved since the Soviet Union used them.
I don't know, like, honestly, if Iran used better tactics, they probably could have won. Because the Iraqi army was such a shitty army.
It was a huge one, though. But I think Iran today does have better military tactics.
Oh, definitely. They're much more experienced.
And
I also think the fact that the generation that grew up as the human wave is now in charge definitely affects it. You're much less likely to order that shit when you were in that human wave.
Drown them with Scud missiles, not with our bodies.
Well, there was another time that the Iraqis just straight up put like
electricity in the water.
Wire. Yeah.
They fucking fry the Iranians, yeah.
It's a little funny, but it's fucked up.
It is fucked up.
It's just like Wile E. Coyote, like level tactics were used in that war, and it's insane.
So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there is a lot. Though luckily, it seems like the tension between Iraq and Iran's lowering. Because I do view that ultimately has been incredibly harmful for the Arab people.
Now there's an important thing I want to tackle, which is leftist infighting. Nowadays, I believe there's one way for the left to rise, and it's leftist solidarity. Even though some leftist position I find dog shit in some groups, however, it is better to work together as a united front. A broader united front, because, even through Arab socialism is going through crisis. Nasserism is no more. If Nasser's organizations wants to carry on the Arab Revolution, they need to work together with other groups. I honestly see all progressive parties to be my natural allies, our natural allies. I'm personally more aligned with Nasserism. The problem with Nasserism is that it kind of relies heavily on what Abdel Nasser did and said in speeches, and it doesn't have really
all related to the 60s.
It doesn't really have any theoretic backbone. Basically, Abdel Nasser in the 50s was basically just moving with what the Arab people want, as I said earlier in the stream. They rallied around him because he was, he had a project to fulfill the dream of the Arab world, unity, freedom, and equality, and end of feudalism. It wasn't until 1962 until he started adopting, more socialist positions and figured out that socialism and class warfare is the way to go.
Well, I think that represents a kind of bigger issue the left has as a whole, and that's that there's not a lot of new thought being developed.
That is true. Some people take Marx as gospel and move in. Actually, but about Nasser's theory, this point is that surprisingly enough, there is a way to find Nasser's theory, which is not written by Abdel Nasser. Books.
Third international theory.
It's Nasserism. It's Nasser's theory. It's written. It's books published by, let's say, but by the CAUS, the Center for Arab Unity Studies. I am currently reading their book about the Arab Vanguard, and I've saw some of that theory basis. And listen, a lot of the ways that the Arab Vanguard was structured, a lot of the ways that it was espoused to work as a revolutionary vanguard in the Arab world, to move, to lead the masses to revolution through revolution. They can. When I'm reading the book and I'm saying like this is actual revolutionary organization. This is theory. This is theory. This political theory right there. Be it on the Carter that is laced with Baathism that not many people look at. Be it with the analysis of history, be it with the analyzing of the current situation, and the Arab Vanguard Carter at that time, said that there is only one logical conclusion, which is the triumph of socialism over the crumbling capitalism. that was, wishful thinking in 1974. But I do believe that capitalism is going to its last leg. We are in the late stage of capitalism. Corporations are shaping itself to become in their final form as this abomination against God and humanity itself. Um, and once capitalism crumbles, we're going to post-capitalism. It's going to be two things. Just like Marx said, it's going to be socialism or barbarism with the way things are going. So, so now I'm reading the Arab Vanguard. I'm about to finish it. I have 2 more chapters within it. And by the way, I want to make suggestions for Ostalgie to the Kremlin Games devs when it comes to the Arab Vanguard and Libya. And after I finish the Arab Vanguard, my eyes are set on another book published by the CAUS, The Unmaking of Arab Socialism, or also known in Arabic as تفكيك الاشتراكية العربية. And it's a really and I hear it's a very quoted book even by Western sources, and it aligns with Arab Marxism. So it can be used as an Arab socialist theory book, and some books such as Nasser, The Last of Arabs, which is another book on my list to read, on my to read list, might also be Nasser's theory. So I'm finding more theory about Arab nationalism and socialism through these books that I cannot be finding, through only like I don't want to just settle for speeches. I want to go even deeper. Now the problem with theory is that sometimes it's taken as gospel. Marx wasn't making gospel. I said that before. Marx wasn't making a gospel. He was reacting to the world around him. And he changed, he wrote and rewrote theory. Lenin wrote and rewrote theory. Stalin, Mao.
Say to somewhat counter your point, because I do agree that people take theory as gospel and don't acknowledge that it was a thing of its time. But I will also say that, I feel like a lack of solid theoretical basis is what really caused Gothism, at the very least, to take the turn that it did. From a left-wing progressive force to a right-wing semi-reactionary force.
The funny thing is that Nasserism had no theoretic backbone or basis, and it ended up getting more left-wing as time went by. But Baathism had an entire fucking manifesto and political theory to back it up, and
But the actual Baathist theorists lost power in every single country.
And it was it was taken
Iraq
over by the
Syria.
military.
Yeah, the military took over, and the military did not follow Baath ideology, and that's why, Saddam, as much as Saddam was a counter to American imperialism in the last couple of years of his life, actively worked with American imperialism.
The MI6 had tagged Saddam as a person of interest that can't be negotiated and worked with.
Well, even before the reason that he even invaded Kuwait is because he thought he'd get away with it.
Yes.
Because they had just supported him doing the exact same thing to Iran.
Some even say that the United States gave him the go-ahead to invade Kuwait, and then used this to slam him to establish a new world order against the Soviet Union.
I'll be shocked.
I
don't think it was a new world order against the Soviet Union, because at that point the Soviets were crumbling.
But here's the thing: the Gulf War was an important point because it helped cement a new world order in favor of the United States as the sole superpower on Earth. It was just the USA swinging its dick around.
No, definitely, I agree with that. I also do think that the U.S. doesn't get enough shit for the fact that it destroyed Iraq for 20 years. It made the destruction of the nation of Iraq its personal pet project for a span of 20 years until the nation dissolved in on it.
Now, I think when it comes to Iraq, I think oil is such a go-to phrase because it can be justified, because it can be explained to the mass. It's bad, but it's the lesser of two bads.
It's much deeper than oil, though, in my opinion. Oil is part of why we did it.
It was politicians fattening their pockets. It's what it was. Because who got the exclusive rights to rebuild Iraq? What are the companies? Halliburton was one of them.
Yes.
Who has high
Oh,
stocks in Halliburton? Or why not? Why go to Iraq? Why
yes.
not go way back to Vietnam? You know, Lyndon B. Johnson amped up the war in Vietnam and
Well,
started buying more
thinking
guns.
we'd get
And
our asses kicked.
no,
Would have kicked our asses again on
did
the
you know?
next
Did you
war.
know that Lyndon B. Johnson's wife had a lot of stocks in military manufacturing companies?
Yeah. No, yeah, I do. No, the military-industrial complex is what controls the United States. And also, this kind of leads me into something that I feel like people misunderstand a lot when it comes to imperialism. And I feel like you, as someone who lives in a country dominated by French imperialism, would have an interesting perspective on this. But in the West, it's often portrayed by like people who claim to know a lot about history, like kind of like a well actually.
Yeah.
That yeah, while the British imperialism was dominated by economic interests, like Lenin said, the empires of France and Italy and stuff were much more dominated by like national prestige. That's why they did it. They didn't even turn a profit out of those colonies.
I think
And my
that's kind of
retort to
dog
that
shit. No,
is
that's dog shit.
my retort to that is simply that while the nation of France itself may not have profited from its colonial ventures, the people who ran the nation of France
Profited.
did profit.
Okay. Okay. You know why this is point is dog shit? For them to say just they did it just for the prestige? I want to go back in time to the age of mercantilism, to French mercantilism, which was more industrial than the British, which was more surrounded by based on trade, to Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Jean-Baptiste Colbert, his policies were something kin to state capitalism. You know, something that a socialist state would do. However, he was more of a dog for the king. Like all the money that the country would be making from his policies would go for the court, for the king's court.
Well, yeah, because the idea of the state back then wasn't for the people; it was for the monarch.
For the monarch. But here's the thing: he also supported uh, imperialist expeditions, you know, imperialist conquest for the sake of gaining more gold and silver for the king. You see, he champions imperialism. We're talking mercantilism. This is like before classical liberalism was a thing. Let's not forget the Spanish and the Portuguese. You know, the idea was take gold from outside, keep it inside, don't let it get out of the kingdom.
Well, that was the Spanish. The Portuguese wanted the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, and that's why the Spanish crumbled eventually, and the French and British managed to take over the world. But here's the thing:
Spanish were so incompetent, though. It is a little funny, like that Spain, by all rights, if it was run by like people who knew what the fuck they were doing, would have just taken over the world, and they just fucked it up. You know what I mean?
Fuck imperialists altogether. But yeah, France
No,
did
I
not
agree,
do it.
but it's just funny to read about them fumble a bag that hard.
France did not only do it for the prestige, or Italy. Italy had a lot of things to do. Some of it was to help its economy. Italy, when it after World War One, wanted to go on, before World War One, wanted to go on imperialist expeditions to save its stagnating economy.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but the Italians wanted to provide people with a place to go other than like the United States and Brazil. They wanted to present like Libya and other Italian colonies as a place where Italians could move to find better economic opportunity and so they could still be taxed by the Italian government and not by another government once they move wherever they move to. Because Italy was bleeding people up until like World War One.
So yeah, they did not do it for the prestige alone. The prestige came with it as a colonial power in a club of colonial powers. Fuckers. Let's read what SLR sent. Abba Kovner, that's the name. He migrated to Israel and became captain of the Jivati Brigade. Oh, the Jivati are, I think, the... Oh no, those are the Golani Brigade, okay. and the Golani are like the elite force of the IDF, and participated on the 1948 Nakba, and apparently criticized Israeli forces for not being extreme enough with the invaders, between quotations, which even Israel considered him too extreme. Like, holy fucking shit, dude. Don't take your anger on us. You know, they fucking killed your family in the Holocaust. Go kill former SS officers that got away. Do like that Armenian kid that went and found Jamal Pasha the butcher and fucking shot him in Austria. Holy shit. And by the way, Abdel Nasser has a very interesting quote. You know, Nasser has a very interesting quote about this whole Nakba thing. It was uh, it was one side promising something they didn't have to people that they didn't deserve it. So it was the UK and France promising Palestine, or promising Palestine and Jordan, or the Levant entirely. Who knows? Depending on who was arguing and who was
Yeah,
negotiating. They were giving something they
that's what
did
they would
not
do.
own to people that didn't deserve it, to the Zionists.
Well, well, yeah, because what they would do is they would go to the Arabs and go, if you revolt against the Ottomans, we'll give you land. But they also went to
To the
Jewish
Zionists.
people and went, if you support our war, we'll give you land. And they just didn't care that they gave two contradictory claims. You know what I mean? Like, it was because in the end they were trying to benefit for themselves.
Yeah, and
Because the British wanted ethnic tensions in Palestine, and so that they could make it easier for them to rule. Just like it was easier for them to rule in India because there was so much ethnic tension between the Muslims and Hindus that they were able to exploit.
and they wanted to create a collaborator class. In Lebanon, Maronite Christians had a lot of contacts with the French, so they were historically. So they were the right, the right section of the population to try and create a collaborator class from. The Hashemites became a collaborator class for the British after the Arab Revolt, and its failure against when it came to fighting the European invaders after the war, World War One.
Hashemite ideology is really weird.
But in
As well.
Palestine, I think they needed to create it by getting Jews in from all over the world, shipping them out. And you know what's very fucking hypocritical? Is that Europe did not solve its problems of anti-Semitism, and instead wanted to do what Hitler wanted to do, and it's throw the Jews in one state and call it a day.
No, I agree. I think American involvement in it was also very much. Actually, I don't know. When it comes to American involvement in the establishment of Israel, I think that was more just them trying to see what would happen. I don't know if they went in knowing that would be their only ally in the region, like it became. You know
Here's
what I
an
mean?
interesting tidbit. When the state of Israel was founded, I think Truman was president. I think when he sent a congratulation or a letter of recognition towards Israel of its quote unquote independence or existence, he didn't call it a Jewish state.
No, exactly.
He called it the state of Israel.
The U.S. was basically at that point, and this is not to say that this is what it would always do, obviously.
It was testing the
But at
waters.
that point, we didn't know. Yeah, it was testing the waters. Because the land Zionists were in charge, there was a lot of thought in the U.S. that it would become Soviet aligned. Even in the Soviet Union, that's why they initially recognized it and initially allowed Jews to move there, was because they thought they had a chance of gaining influence over it. But as the situation developed, it basically became the Soviets had influence over the Arabs and
Now here's the thing now. Did you know that after 1967, the 6-Day War, and the start of the War of Attrition. The Soviet Union wanted to keep this no peace, no war situation going on, and I wanted to keep like things really cool in the Middle East. So they just gave Egypt barely any weapons just for defensive capabilities, and they weren't even enough to defend Egypt from more Israeli aggression. However, because because the United States was taking a staunch pro-Israel position in this whole ordeal when it comes to, like, Egypt worked its ass off diplomatically and militarily to just keep the idea that this is not over. This points of ceasefire are not the points of the point that Israel reached is not another point of ceasefire. It's not how things will continue to be. This is a continuous battle, and tried to revive the idea that no, this isn't over at the international scale, and trying to get the Soviet Union to fucking react as they should. The United States, if it hadn't took a very staunch pro-Israel position, the Soviets' influence in the Middle East would have been doomed, because it was this American blunder that made Soviet influence grow in the Middle East.
No, I agree. Well, because at that point, the U.S. was so paranoid of communism that they thought Nasser was a communist, essentially. Like, that's the reality of the matter. They thought Nasser was a communist. They thought that Pasha, what's his name, the guy that took over, Sadat. They were very wary of Sadat.
Actually, no, Sadat was a CIA agent by his own willingness since the 1950s. It's the Washington Post after Camp David, I believe, the Camp David Accord. The Washington Post released an article stating that Sadat was a CIA asset, and this was now I'm not too sure about this, but this was relayed in a televised interview on the Egyptian channel ART a long time ago by Hussein al-Shafi'i. Hussein al-Shafi'i was one of the two vice presidents to Nasser when he died, the other one being Sadat, and he was the most likely successor to Abdel Nasser. And I won't say he was a socialist; he was more of a statist that wanted, from what I see his positions, he wanted to keep the Nasser system in place, to keep the revolution alive in Egypt, the Arab Revolution. But it wasn't necessarily a socialist. And he, by the way, he kind of saved Sadat from a coup inside the Arab Socialist Union. Like, at one point, it was like when you play CML and then they stand up and start criticizing you inside the party, and it's a party coup if you fail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically that. The coup people took strategic positions in the Congress of the ASU and stood up one by one and started bashing Sadat's reputation to the ground. Sadat was fucking shivering and sweating profusely until Hussein al-Shafi'i basically cut them off and said, "What's the whole fucking point of this conversation right now? We're talking about Arab unity, about establishing the Federation of Arab States between Libya, Syria, and Egypt. What's the necessity of talking about this right now?"
He probably should have let him talk, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, it was the best idea, because after that, al-Shafi'i was removed from power by Sadat when he just removed everybody from the Nasser system and
that
demolished
makes
it.
somewhat sense why you would remove him, because if he's strong enough to save you, he's strong enough
to remove you.
Yeah, that's like when people criticize Stalin for some of his moves. It's like, well, think about it. If he's strong enough to get you in that position, he's strong enough to take you out. Like, fucking, you gotta jump on that shit.
I mean, yeah. But now, honestly, I think, back to it, leftist infighting is really stupid, and we need to find a common ground, all of us together, and work together. Oh, there's a lot of problems sometimes with some leftist positions, but we need to mitigate this through conversations. However, some people that try to call themselves leftists, but are in fact just simply promoting right-wing rhetoric with a red coat of paint, I don't really like them. There's a leftist American YouTuber I think that calls themselves a Leninist, an American Leninist. I'm not too sure. I don't think it'll be a wise idea to say. Or you know what? Fuck it. Who's gonna bite me now? Who's gonna come at me? Fellow Traveler is the name. Fellow Traveler. Fellow Traveler have
I've
had
never seen it.
some racist things to say. You know, for example, calling Afghanis sand Arabs with flip flops that managed to defeat the Americans. He had a lot of suspicious rhetoric. One time, I directly asked him, "Let's just supposedly say a socialist revolution takes place in the United States. What would be its position towards the Middle East?" He said it will be arming and supporting socialist groups that align with the revolutionary United States, and it would help them stage a coup against the governments. And I'm like, so you're basically just doing social imperialism. You're basically just.
I mean, I do think that a socialist group should support other socialist
I mean,
groups
listen. So there's a
taking
difference
power.
between supporting socialist groups, and there's a difference between aiming to
But
start
I don't. Yeah.
coups all over the Arab world, just to
Or
align them.
just to empower pro-American parties. I agree that that
Now
would
it
be.
like it
I do also
seriously
think
feel
that.
American imperialism with a pink coat of paint. Like I like
Well, I agree. I do think that if there was a socialist revolution in America, there should be like groups like the PLFP should be supported by the new American government.
I mean, yeah, like listen, supporting socialist groups in struggle, I understand that. However, forming socialist groups or supporting already existing socialist groups and inciting them for coup d'etats, that's not how revolution is done.
I agree. No, you shouldn't always incite socialist groups to continue revolution. That's like a failure of, for example, China, is they stopped inciting socialist groups to revolution, and that's where a lot of the revisionism comes from. You know what I mean? Like, to try to work within the capitalist system as opposed to abolish it shouldn't be what any socialist nation espouses. They should always espouse for revolution amongst workers to free themselves.
So yes, I hate this social imperialist rhetoric. I do not appreciate it. There's another people, someone like Haas. Holy fucking shit! I just heard the earth tremble, as if an army of gorillas is preparing to attack me. That's what he calls his followers, gorillas. The guy is Lebanese, Americanized as fuck. I don't really watch his streams for one reason and one reason only. He's
Hassan?
annoying. He's annoying. He won't have the fucking time. He's shouting. I want my eardrums to be intact. I want to be able to hear my lectures. Okay? I want to be able to hear what I'm studying. Holy shit, man! He's very loud and
I
very
agree.
nonsensical. I just don't bother. No, I'd rather
I do
just.
have to go. My phone is about to die. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's been a really good talk. I'm really glad you could join us tonight.
I appreciate that. I hope you have a great night.
Yeah. I send my
I'll
love to
listen
your
to the
family.
stream later.
Um,
All right. Have a good night.
have a good night. So we talked about leftists and fighting and how bad it is. How we as leftists we need to mitigate the situation. Solve any contradictions together, form a broader progressive front for change, because capitalism is not sustainable. Capitalism will collapse, and we need to seize the initiative. And this is far more important in the quote-unquote third world countries, because many people think that because we have the most material conditions for a revolution, and I believe that is the way to go. I believe that going for a planned economic model with automation is a good way to go to start. I do not think that it's going to happen overnight. I think it's going to be a process building up towards it. And maybe as capitalism eventually reaches its last legs, that crumbles itself by itself, of course, by the pressure of socialist movements as well, and movements for progress and change, I think the stage would be set, and a true national liberation for the oppressed people of the world everywhere would be able to be achieved. I want to say that, want to add more that the Middle East is also a colonial term in nature. It's a colonial term in nature. West Asia should refer to the Middle East as a whole. And if we're talking about the Arab portion of the Middle East, we're going to talk about the Arab Mashriq, the eastern part of the Arab world, as opposed to the Arab Maghrib, the western part of the Arab world. These are more specific, these are more detailed terms, these are better terms, these are not colonial terms, these are terms that we provide by ourselves for ourselves. I think the look for a better term to describe the current capitalist relations is very important between countries. For example, the third world ain't gonna cut it. Global South ain't gonna cut it. And that socialist theory needs update every now and then. It's theory, praxis, theory, praxis. And I do think that Nasserists, Arab socialists, shouldn't simply rely on a bunch of speeches or a bunch of positions that any progressive Arab leader would have taken. Abdel Nasser was a great leader, was a great commander. However, he was also a human being. There's a lot to criticize about him and some of his mistakes. It doesn't take away from his accomplishments, but he's not a deity. However, if we do want a true theory for ourselves, we need to look into studies assessing Arab revolutions, assessing especially the revolution in Egypt, assessing the Nasserist era, which was the golden age of Arab socialism. We assess them, we see what went wrong, what went right, what was the basis of their thought, and how we can build more basis for our thought, how we can make more theory out of this, and how we can progress and act upon this newfound theory. We need to, as Allah is saying, we need to learn from, not preach from. Leave preaching for religion. Leave preaching for religion, for the scriptures, for the books, for the Abrahamic books, or any other different religious scriptures. Preaching, that's for religion. Learning, that's for politics. And I'm a staunch secularist. I don't want a complete separation of state and religion. However, I do not want to attack religion. I do want to keep religion as an effective, force in society. I do not want to rob people of spirituality at all. I am personally a religious Muslim. I'm a religious Muslim. So what can we conclude? What can we conclude after everything that was said, that was discussed? And by the way, this isn't the end of this discussion. In the future, we would continuously talk about these things. This was simply a general talk, and I do hope in the future more people will join in the conversations, more people will give their opinions, more people will join in the chat. It's called Let's Talk, not Let Me Talk. Let's talk all together and discuss all sorts of topics together. I know that the first episode of the series was more free, more topics were able to be discussed. Everybody could throw their opinion around. Everybody could throw a topic to start a discussion about. That's good. However, I also realized that when we are localizing themes around each episode, that becomes better. Because now with each episode it has different stances, different focus points, and while we were talking about a lot of things in general, we talk about a lot of things in a general manner, general knowledge. However, every time we stray a little far from the topic, we try to redirect our course, and want to that's what I want to aim for in these streams. And I do believe that before every stream, I'm going to announce when it's gonna happen roughly, and and what would the general theme about, so that people that want to join in would have maybe a sort of an idea of what they want to talk about. Now, we're almost at our end, so now there's a giveaway, and I do not know how to do giveaways. I should have looked into that. However, lately I've been too busy to actually check that out. Imagine being too busy to check out giveaways on YouTube. So that being said, I have a GOG key for a Wolfenstein game. Let me just check which game. I have a key which is valuable. You know, it's viable to be used until June 6th. You still so you still have a lot of time. It's for hold on, let me check which Wolfenstein game was again. Let's see. Man, I'm sleepy. No wonder I'm sleepy. It's 3:23 a.m. It's a Wolfenstein New Order GOG code. And I want to do a giveaway for the viewers who are right now in here. So everybody who is listening to me right now, everybody who can comment, I beg of you, write down anything in the live chat. Write it down so I know who's watching and who's not. So I know what are the names that are watching with me. Then I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to use this random wheel thing, type in the names, do the random wheel thing, and whoever name lands on first, I want them to come to Discord as fast as possible to contact me, and so I can give them the key. So please, everybody watching right now, type something in the live chat. I beg of you. I'm going to already start adding some names because I already know some of you guys who usually frequent my streams. So from those who are still watching, please leave a message. Type down anything. I should have seriously figured out how to do a giveaway earlier before that. Should have probably done it in the middle of the stream. I don't think anybody is still watching this other than me. Yeah, this is not good. Totally not good. Right. It'll be 2 minutes. It'll be 2 minutes till 3 a.m. Okay, almost 1 minute till 3 a.m. I want you guys to I want you guys to type your names or type, anything so I know you're watching in this interval, and so I can do a giveaway. And if not, unfortunately, I will have to uh, give this code to someone who supported the channel financially, someone who deserves some get some payback. Not that you don't not deserve getting the code, but I mean, what option do I have if I'm not actively engaging online with you? How would you even know that you got the game through the giveaway? I should, mitigate giveaways better in the future. So whoever's still online, I'll give 1 more minute. 1 more minute. Just type anything. Anything down there. So I can do the giveaway. Well, fortunately, it appears like as if nobody is responding. That is unfortunate. It's my bad. I should have done this giveaway thing much, much earlier. I am terribly sorry. But also, I want to end the stream right now. It's very late for me, and my voice is not doing too good. My throat is very sore from this talk. These streams do take a toll on my throat. But thank you all guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully in the future we'd have more fun, far more active discussions. I will try my best to stream when I say I'm going to stream and not just kick it 2 weeks later. I'm terribly sorry. I just have a lot of things going on right now that happened, and I needed to deal with them. And the situation did not allow for me to be able to sit down and stream. And right now was the everything was just working in my favor tonight. Um, I mean, I guess it is fair. No, I had the idea of making it like a giveaway, but I do not have the facilities to put it off, and it's not every day that I get my hands on something that I can do for a giveaway. And I think there's other kind of prizes I can give to people. Uh, I do have a good way with editing stuff in Photoshop. I mean, my thumbnails are kind of good enough, don't you think? I've also, for a while, I've used to make banners for Discord Nitro users that, my friends, I would make banners for them. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Long live the revolution, eh? Hopefully, one day, relations between countries and people would be on the basis of equality and equity. That there would be no more oppression, no more exploitation. Here's praying, here's hoping. I salute you all. Have a good weekend, have a good night, and take care of yourselves. Be good people. Goodbye.